Once you get in a zone, it's kind of like you're in a zone, and there's nothing that can really phase you.
Just being in that zone.
You know he's in the zone. He's making checks.
I just felt like I was in the zone.
Man, I was in the zone that night.
I was in the zone.
You definitely be in the zone.
Just in the zone.
I do feel like I'm in the zone right now, but I feel like we are in the zone.
What's up, everyone, and welcome to In the Zone. I'm the host, Brian, and I am so excited to have you guys on here for the first episode of this new rebranding. And this episode's a fun one. We're diving into the NBA Draft Lottery that happened about 3 weeks ago now. It was on May 12th, and man, did it bring out some crazy fans on Twitter and Instagram, some crazy reactions, and I can't wait to dive into it. So really, I just want to give you guys a little overview of what was the outcome from it. And so the order, if you don't know what the draft lottery is, the draft lottery for the NBA is basically taking the 14 teams that did not make the playoffs and putting them together in random with ping pong balls, and each ping pong ball has like a team, and then the NBA league office, some person from the league office goes in, selects the ping pong ball, calls it out. First ball taken is the 14th, second is the 13th, and so on until you get to the number one. And it's supposed to be randomized. It's supposed to prevent teams from tanking. So really bad teams, if they're like, oh, this series is gone, or this season's lost, that's it. I'm just going to tank for the rest of the 40 games that we have left. It's supposed to prevent that so that they can't just tank for a better player. And it really, over the years that has been implemented, it's really kind of brought up a lot of theories, a lot of fan theories, that before this draft, and I think even before the 2023 draft with Wembanyama, hasn't really been brought to light as heavily until now. Like these last two drafts these last two of three drafts, so 2023 and 2025, have really kind of brought out those theorists again. And it's kind of hard to argue with them if you look back in the history, which I'll delve into in a little bit. But it is very interesting, and it brought out a lot of fun banter on whether it was Twitter or X now, or Instagram or TikTok, wherever you look at social media, it brought out a lot. Articles were made and everything. So before I dive into a little bit of the details, I'm just going to give you the overview of what the outcome was for the top 14 picks. So starting at 1, that was the big shocker. It was the Dallas Mavericks. Ended up getting the right to draft Cooper Flag. And so they were able to get it. The Spurs were second, 76ers were third, Hornets were fourth, Jazz fifth, Wizards sixth, Pelicans 7, Nets 8, Raptors 9, Rockets 10, Blazers 11, Bulls 12, Hawks 13, and Spurs 14. So a lot of names, but the three main ones that you really want to focus on, or at least the main section you want to focus on, is that top 3 to 6 picking. Those are the ones you want to focus on because that was the heavy conversation just throughout Twitter, throughout social media, and everything else, just because it was such a shocker. So personally, it's getting hard. I'm going to be honest. If you're Adam Silver and you're trying not to make it seem like it's rigged, you make it incredibly difficult. Either you like playing with the food and the fans, or you just are really bad at hiding your lies. Because, like I said, the last 3 drafts now, I'll even bump it up to 3, including last year, the last 3 drafts have been very, very questionable on like how a certain team got it. You had the Spurs in 2023 with Wembanyama. You had the Hawks last year, who were a play-in team. And you had the Mavericks this year, who were a play-in team only because, mind you, they only were a play-in team because they traded their 25-year-old superstar for pretty much a bag of chips and some crumble cookies to the Lakers. Like, that was all they got. It was nothing. It makes no sense. And it really just begs the question. So if you're wondering what the percentage was for the top 3 teams, the Mavericks had a 1.8% chance. The Spurs had a 6% chance. And the 76ers had a 10.5% chance to get the number 1. So out of the 3, the 76ers makes the most sense for getting the 3rd overall pick. In fact, it was actually their best percentage outside of 7 and 6 was to get the 3rd overall pick. That was like their best percentage. So the 76ers make sense. They had an injury-riddled season. Sadly, Paul George, Tyrese Maxey, and Joel Embiid experiment did not work. and everyone got injured. It just wasn't pretty. They ended up falling off. Even their Jared McCain, even their star rookie that was kind of showing off all of a sudden and was kind of popping out, he was going great, he got injured and was missed the rest of the season. So it was just not a good year, and it makes sense. Not really shocking for them. It's the Spurs and Mavericks that jumped up 5+ spots to get to where they landed. The Mavericks jumping up 10 spots just to get to the number 1. So it's really interesting to see that. And it just doesn't quite add up, especially once you put in the storyline of the fact that they traded their superstar. Their GM made a boneheaded trade to trade their young superstar for Anthony Davis, who's 31 and injury prone, who then got injured after being traded. They also traded in Max Christie. So Max Christie went to Dallas as well. He's about 25, 26 years old. Not bad, not great. He's not really going to be a superstar. He might not even be a star, but he's going to be a good piece into the lineup. And they got 1 first-round pick. That's what you get for trading a 25-year-old superstar who brought you to your first championship appearance since Dirk in 2011. And it's made no sense. It was out of the blue, midnight. I mean, it was crazy. And it started because of a talk over a cup of coffee between Nico Harrison and Rob Pelinka, the Lakers GM, and the Mavericks GM is Nico. It just made no sense. And their reward for doing this was not only dropping like 7 spots in seeding, because they were a top 5, top 4 seed before they traded Luka. And mind you, Luka was hurt for a little bit, but he was coming back and getting them back into playoff position. They trade him, they drop into the play-in, lose a competitive play-in, and then go from there to getting the first overall pick. So the reward is getting one of the best stars to come out of college in the past few seasons. And I say out of college specifically because Wembanyama did not go to college, he was international. But it's just very, very questionable. And so I'm just like, again, if you're Adam Silver, the NBA commissioner, and you're trying to hide the fact that you're rigging, you're not doing a great job. And if you're not even rigging it, then there must be some crazy luck. I mean, it's insane. The last 2 seasons, both number 1 overall picks were play-ins. They played in the play-in, lost as the 10th seed, and then got the number 1 overall pick. And if you think that this was the only time a team with less than a 2% chance to get the first overall pick ended up winning the first overall pick, you're sadly wrong. There are 3 other teams that had less than even the Mavericks' chance of winning the first overall and ended up winning it. So the 3 teams are the Magic in 1993, the Cavs in 2014, and the Bulls in 2008. And while you might say, oh, well, that's just random, it might be that, blah, 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 like, okay, it doesn't mean much. It's when you start looking into who was the number 1 pick that year. Now, while the Magic with 93 and Chris Webber is not much of a story there, they had a 1.52% chance, ended up getting Chris Webber. Okay, move on, it's good. But then you kind of look into the Cavs 2014. And the Cavs 2014 was a 1.7% chance to get the first. Now, mind you, the Cavs are coming off 4 straight seasons where they had less than 35 wins. And it's been now 4 seasons since LeBron left. However, in the early spring of 2014, so right before this lottery happened, the Cavs re-signed LeBron in free agency to join Kyrie Irving, Tristan Thompson, and the bunch in the Cavs, because it was just the others. So to add on to adding LeBron and their first overall pick that's now about 24 years old in Kyrie, and their young power forward in Tristan Thompson, to add on to that, they gave him the first overall pick when they had a 1.7% chance. They then traded that pick right away after draft. They selected Andrew Wiggins, traded him to the Timberwolves. So now you're thinking, oh, well, they just used it as a trade. But they traded him, Anthony Bennett, and a protected 2015 first-round pick for a 25-year-old Kevin Love who was averaging 26, 12, and 4 with the Timberwolves the year before. So they end up trading this hopeful number 1 prospect and a few other players and key contributors or whatever, like another player and a pick, to get a 25-year-old secondary star at that time. I mean, he was really coming into his own. And it just makes you question, like, okay, so that's a little interesting. They win the pick with a less than 2% chance, and then they're able to trade that with another first round and not a heavy package to get a star that can complement Kyrie and LeBron. Makes it a little questionable. Then you go into the third pick, and this is one that's very, very interesting. The Bulls in 2008 had a 1.7% chance to get the number 1 overall pick. That year, the number 1 overall pick was a kid from Chicago named Derrick Rose. And for a franchise and an organization that have not really been on the map at that time in about 12 years, since Michael had his last championship, he had about 2 more years after that, 3 more years. So basically, since Michael left, not having that same market value, it makes it very interesting that all of a sudden they have a chance to go in the lottery. What a storyline it would be to bring home the Chi-Town kid back into the Chicago City, like back into the Bulls, make him play for the hometown team, bring him in as the number 1 unanimous overall pick, and let him play. So it just is a really interesting philosophy there. The fourth is obviously the Mavericks. And then if you want to go one step after the Mavericks, it's the Cavs at number 5. This year, the Cavs, it was 2011. They had a 2.8% chance to get the first overall pick. And they selected Kyrie Irving, the unanimous first overall pick from Duke in 2011, point guard. One of the shiftiest point guards we've seen, really talented. And it's just interesting because if you look back at the stats, that 2011 draft was 1 year, basically, almost exactly, I think it was 13 months after LeBron announced that he was going to Miami. He was taking his talents to South Beach. 13 months after that, the Cavs, with a less than 3% chance of the first overall pick, get a first overall pick to replenish the star they lost. Now, mind you, they dropped from 61 to 19 wins, and they only bumped back up to 21 after getting Kyrie. But to be able to revive a market that was pretty much dead in the water, but to revive a market like the Cavs, who had just lost one of their most pivotal pieces in franchise history, to revive it in over 1 year, when you see the Wizards, who have gone for 45 years and never been able to really revive their market from Wes Unseld. I mean, they had John Wall, they had Bradley Beal, but to never really get the same hype of championships that like Wes Unseld had. Granted, he had 1, but he still had a championship, something the Wizards don't have. It's very interesting when you start comparing those and the Bulls and everyone else. So this brings it back to, is it rigged? And with all the history of it and everything else that they bring up, you have the 1985 draft. You have the Knicks, who was David Stern's, the former commissioner's, favorite team, all of a sudden get Patrick Ewing. That's where really the rumors started. Was it a bent envelope? Was it a frozen envelope? Did he know what envelope it was? All those started. That was in 1985. 2011, like I said, Kyrie Irving. 2012, Anthony Davis. That's another interesting one. You sit there and you look at it. Anthony Davis was selected by the New Orleans Hornets. So this was before they were the Pelicans. And it was a new team, they switched. They came over from Charlotte, going to New Orleans. And the Hornets at that time, the New Orleans Hornets, were just sold to a new owner from the league after the league had to buy it due to debt. The old owner, George Shinn, was in debt, so the league bought the team and then sold it to Tom Benson in April of 2012. And then 1 month later, Anthony Davis is given to the Hornets for the first overall pick. One of the best, if not the best, college freshman we've ever seen play is given to a team that has a new owner, that is a small market, that needs to really rejuvenate their market and bring in more life and more eyes. Of course, they get the first overall pick. Then you jump into modern day, like I've said before, 2023, Victor Wembanyama. There's a big man, a center specifically, a center forward, who is all of a sudden supposedly one of the next greatest big men, if not greatest players to come out. 19 years old. And of course, he goes to the Spurs, who, if you look in their history, have only won the lottery 2 other times. Those 2 other times, 87 with David Robinson, center, a phenom as a big man. He's a center phenom. And Tim Duncan in 1997. The other time, there was a big man phenom. So you had 87, 97, and 2023. All of them were phenomenal young big men who were coming out, centers or power forwards. And it was David Robinson, Tim Duncan, and now Victor Wembanyama. So it throws in a little wrinkle into it. It's like, why? How is it so coincidental that those 3 happen? Then you look at 2024, Hawks, a play-in team. Granted, it was not a strong class at all. Not a very strong class in many of the eyes of the experts. But 2024, a play-in team gets the number 1 overall pick. Then to back it up, 2025, a team that made one of the worst trades and was in the play-in, ended up getting the first overall pick. It's just a very weird coincidence that they've had, and especially this run. And then if you want to go away from the first overall pick, we're going to go back to the Spurs. In the last 3 years, the Spurs had the first overall pick, the fourth overall pick, and the second overall pick, including this year. Their first overall pick won Rookie of the Year, Wembanyama. Their fourth overall pick last year won Rookie of the Year, Stephon Castle, guard/forward. Now they're getting the second overall pick, possibly getting Dylan Harper, an 18-year-old stud at the guard position that can be there for years, that can pair with Castle, Wembanyama, Sohan, and the rest of their young core. So, like I said in the beginning, if Adam Silver is trying to hide this rigging, or at least this conspiracy, he's not doing a great job of it. But if he's not, then this must be one heck of a coincidence, because it's just so small to be able to get that. And when you look at the amount of teams to have less than a 2 or 3% chance to get the first overall pick, when doing the actual math and calculations, there is a 0.12% chance of all 5 happening in 40 years, of all 5 times happening in 40 years. So 5 teams in 40 years that all had a less than 3% chance get the first overall pick. It had a less than 0.2% chance of happening, and it happened. So that's where I'm just sitting here, and I'm saying that I don't know if it's rigged. Like, I want to say it is. That's like the conspiracy in me. But it's hard to say it is, because how would they be able to do it? And that's where it feeds into, you don't really have much of a control as much as many fans want to predict or think. With the ping pong balls that they do, or with the ping pong balls that they do, you can't really control it that well. Like, that's not going to be something where it's like, I know exactly what balls I'm going to grab it. It's just not that feasible with how they do it. But it is a fun question to ask. Now, with that said, I do think they need to move away from the lottery. In all unbiased opinion, taking away the conspiracy, I think the NBA should move away from the lottery. And the reason is not because teams, it's not because of like this conspiracy theory of everyone, all the rigging happening. The main reason I want to move it away is for the ability for the league to grow, especially these small market teams. When you look at the Hornets, the Wizards, the Jazz, the Utah Jazz, the 3 worst teams in the league are all out of the top 3 picks in the draft. They're picking 4, 5, and 6, and the worst 2 are picking 5 and 6. So I don't think this lottery is helping as much as you might think. Because technically, if you want to speak about it, you could argue the Sixers tried tanking. Yes, they were injured, but you could say that they were trying to tank, and somehow they won it at 3 overall. That's still a really good player and contributor and possibly a star in your future in this draft. So what I'm thinking is that they need to rearrange or reset how they do this draft selection. It can't just be a lottery of all 14 teams, because you have teams that are above 500 that made it almost to the playoffs as being in the play-in, and you have teams like the Wizards or like the Jazz who didn't even eclipse 20 wins. So when you look at this, I think there are 2 solutions that they can do. One, they go like what the NFL has. Worst team gets worst pick, or worst team gets best pick. You get what you get. You can trade out, you can trade in, whatever the case may be. That's an easy answer. But the second one I saw on YouTube. I saw it was on comment, and I actually really liked it. If you really like the lottery, because it allows you to get extra views. So the lottery is obviously a month and a half before the draft in June. So the lottery's in May, the draft is in June. It gives another kind of a view. So you have games, you have off-season, you have draft. Now you add in a 4th viewership gaining. I don't really know what it's exactly called, like how to describe it, but basically it allows for the fans to still be tied in with the NBA even when there are no games going on. It's just another way to get money, to get views, and to market the league. So if you want to keep that as a way to gain money and gain viewership and gain traction among the fans, what I would suggest, like this YouTube comment gave, was doing multiple different lotteries. So for example, you have 14 picks, and 16 or 15 through 30 stay the same. It's whoever loses first in playoffs get it. That's what it is. But from 1 to 14, you should break it off into 3 groups. 1 to 4, 5 to 9, 10 to 14. In 1 to 4, you have a lottery of the 4 worst teams. So the 4 worst teams all have a lottery and they select in the top 4. 5 through 9 all have a lottery and select between 5 and 9. And then 10 through 14 all have a lottery and go between 10 and 14. Because it does allow smaller markets like the Wizards, the Jazz, the Hornets, even you can argue the Pelicans now because they're kind of falling off with a little bit. All those smaller markets can gain traction and boost their fan base. They can improve their earnings, and now you have 30 teams that can all bring in revenue rather than just 5 or 7. So I think it's really just a way of maybe you can keep your lottery. That's the solution to this. You can keep the lottery aspect, but just make it a little bit more fair so that teams that do happen to go on a run, whether they tank or whether they don't, they can still be in that top echelon of picks because they need it. That's how you grow. You don't expect to grow by just keep feeding your main sources. That's not how an organization should grow. An organization or league should grow by feeding the weak sources. Because you make the weak sources stronger, you make the league stronger as a whole. And so when you keep giving the Mavericks or the Spurs or the Lakers, granted they might not be big markets, maybe if you look at the town, but they're well-known franchises and well-known organizations that if you keep feeding those, you're not going to make as exponentially big of a leap in the fan base as you would if you were to grow the Wizards or you grow Utah Jazz, who probably have no fans that I know of. I mean, they do have fans, but it's like very small and minuscule, or you build up the Hornets. And so that's my favorite solution, is to have those 3 mini lotteries and then 15 through 30 be whoever get eliminated first. So with all that said, I will recap once again what the top 14 were. Like I said, I can't say for sure if it's rigged. I do not know. I like to believe it as the conspiracy in me, like the conspiracy theorist. I don't know how to exactly pronounce it, but the person in me that really wants to see fun happen in the league, I would love to say it's rigged. I can't say it, but it sure as heck looks like it if you look into the history. It's just a lot of interesting questions and scenarios and coincidences have happened to make this a real possibility. But personally, I would still say it's not rigged. Just because I think it is a little bit tough to be able to work with 30 different organizations and somehow get it to work out exactly how you need to do. Yes, the Mavericks could have tanked to get in the top 14 for the lottery, but they didn't. It's tough to not only tank for that long and pick the exact right time to tank, but it's also tough to say like, hey, Rockets, you got to go on a win streak, or hey, Warriors, you got to go on a win streak, or some other team. Like you can't say, oh, Paul George fake an injury and then hope that the rest of the East wins out. It's just too many working cogs that can't put together in a organized fashion or an easy fashion to say it's rigged. That's just the truth. You can't scheme together 30 different organizations. Each organization has at least 15 players because that's what you got to have for a starting lineup or for a NBA roster. So now you're putting 30 organizations with 15 people. It's too much to be true. As much as I'd love to have it be true, it's just too much to be true. So to wrap this up, I'll give you guys one more time the top 14. And in a later episode, I will probably give an NBA draft mock draft just to give my prediction of who's going to be selected and who should be selected. But for right now, to end this one, I'll just give you guys the top 14 once again. The Mavericks sit at number 1. The Spurs sit at number 2. The Sixers sit at number 3. Those are the top 3. Hornets, Jazz, and Wizards go 4, 5, and 6. Pelicans at 7. Nets at 8. Raptors at 9. Rockets at 10. And to close out 11 through 14, it goes Blazers, Bulls, Hawks, and Spurs once again. So with all that said, this is a fun episode. I know it's a little confusing when you start thinking conspiracies and going through and everything, but it's always a topic that comes up every year at May. It just so happened that this year seemed more than ever that it was true. But like I said, it's really tough to organize 30 teams, each with at least 15 players and hundreds of more people working in the staff and organizations to try and get a lottery rigged like it is in the past. So with that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed this first episode of In the Zone, and I can't wait to see you next week when I return. See you guys, and stay in the zone.